They laughed when Grandma was left penniless, mocked her, abandoned her, and treated her like nothing. But the next morning, inside a quiet bank office, the truth shook everything. She wasn't broke at all. She was sitting on a hidden fortune worth $200 million. A fortune her late husband had secretly locked away, with strings attached that no one expected. Now, the family that turned their backs on her will do anything to take it back, and the entire town is caught in the storm. Will love and faith guide her through the betrayal, or will greed tear everything apart? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. Eleanor stood before her modest closet, fingering the fabric of her Sunday dress. She'd patched the sleeve last winter, but the navy blue still held its dignity, just like she hoped to do tonight. After applying a touch of the same rose lipstick she'd worn for 40 years, she pinned Harold's mother's brooch to her collar. Some treasures money couldn't buy. The bus dropped her 2 blocks from Richard's sprawling Tudor home. Eleanor's knees protested as she made her way up the winding driveway, past manicured hedges and a fountain that cost more than her first house. She paused at the massive front door, straightening her back before pressing the doorbell. "Mother." Richard's voice held that familiar note of impatience. "You're actually on time." "Hello, dear." Eleanor stepped inside, her sensible shoes suddenly feeling shabby against the marble foyer. "I brought apple pie, your father's recipe." Richard took the pie with 2 fingers as if handling something distasteful. "Sylvia's ordered dessert from that French bakery downtown." Eleanor nodded, following him through the cavernous living room. The voices grew louder as they approached the dining room, then fell silent when she appeared. "Grandma's here," announced her granddaughter Melissa without looking up from her phone. Around the gleaming mahogany table sat her children and grandchildren, faces she'd once powdered, tears she'd dried, hearts she'd tried to fill with something more lasting than ambition. Eleanor, Sylvia, Richard's wife, gestured vaguely toward an empty chair. "We were just discussing the situation." "What situation?" Eleanor asked, settling into her seat. The glances exchanged around the table made her stomach tighten. "Let's eat first," Richard's brother Thomas muttered, reaching for the wine. Dinner progressed with conversation flowing around Eleanor like water around a stone. They discussed vacation homes, private schools, investment opportunities worlds apart from her quiet life of church volunteering and neighborhood bake sales. As the dessert plates were cleared, Richard tapped his crystal glass. The room fell silent. "Mother, we need to discuss finances." His voice carried that boardroom authority he'd perfected. "I've been through Dad's papers thoroughly. There's nothing left." Eleanor's fork clattered against china. "What do you mean?" "The pension's gone. Medical bills ate through the savings. That little house of yours is mortgaged to the hilt." He leaned back, studying her face. "You're broke, Mother. That can't be right." Eleanor's voice sounded small even to her own ears. "Your father was always so careful." "Careful?" Thomas barked a laugh. "Dad was from another era. He didn't understand modern finances." "What about the certificates in the safe deposit box?" Eleanor asked. Richard's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Worthless. The company folded years ago." "Well," Melissa's teenage voice cut through the silence, "guess we know who'll be moving to Sunny Pines retirement home. The state-funded wing." Laughter rippled around the table. "Perhaps she could rent out rooms," Sylvia suggested, lips curving. "Though who'd want to live with all those doilies and cat figurines?" "I don't have cats," Eleanor whispered. "Don't worry, Mother," Richard said, not bothering to hide his condescension. "We'll figure something out for you. Perhaps you could help with the grandchildren, though we'd need to get you a phone from this century." More laughter. "Remember when she tried to use the iPad?" Thomas's wife hooted. "She thought it was broken because the screen kept changing." Eleanor folded her napkin carefully. "If you'll excuse me," she made her way to the powder room, closing the door on their continuing jokes. In the mirror, her reflection stared back, the same blue eyes Harold had called windows to heaven. Now they filled with silent tears. From the dining room, laughter rose and fell like waves against her dignity. Eleanor pressed a tissue to her eyes, careful not to smudge what little makeup she'd applied. The mirror reflected back a woman she barely recognized, smaller somehow, diminished. Harold would have hated seeing her this way. She drew a deep breath, remembering his words on their last anniversary. "Steel in that spine of yours, Ellie. Don't you forget it." She squared her shoulders and returned to the dining room, where conversation halted briefly before resuming with renewed enthusiasm. "There you are, Mother." Richard swirled amber liquid in a crystal tumbler. "We've been discussing your options." Eleanor eased back into her chair. "I believe I can manage just fine." Richard's laugh cut through the air. "With what? Dad didn't leave much. I've been handling his accounts for years." "Harold always managed our finances," Eleanor said quietly. "And look where that got you." Richard spread his hands. The pension barely covers property taxes, and those investments he was so proud of? Practically worthless. Thomas leaned forward. Richard's right. Dad was stuck in the past, wouldn't listen to our advice about diversifying. I have access to our accounts, Eleanor said. The joint checking account? Richard's smile turned pitying. Mother, there's less than $3,000 there. The medical bills cleaned everything out. Eleanor's fingertips pressed white against the tablecloth. Harold was very thorough. Very thorough at hiding how badly he managed money, Richard interrupted. Lucky for you, I've been overseeing things since his health declined. His daughter Jennifer giggled. Remember when Grandpa insisted on paying for dinner with that ancient checkbook? So embarrassing. The restaurant wouldn't even accept it, Melissa added. Richard placed a folder before Eleanor. I've taken the liberty of contacting a realtor. Your house could fetch a decent price, enough to secure a small apartment. Eleanor stared at the glossy brochure. You want me to sell our home? Be practical, Mother. It's too much for you to maintain. The yard alone is a disaster, Sylvia added. And those ancient appliances are energy hogs. Eleanor's chest tightened. Harold had planted every shrub in that yard, had built the birdhouses that dotted the maple trees. I think I should go home now. We're just trying to help, Richard said, impatience edging his voice. Someone has to be realistic here. Grandma could move into one of those senior apartments, Thomas's son suggested. My friend's grandmother loves hers. Bingo on Tuesdays. The family erupted in laughter again. I need to catch the last bus. Eleanor stood shakily. I'll have Simon drive you, Richard said, not moving from his chair. I prefer the bus. Eleanor gathered her purse, unable to meet their eyes. The weight of their judgment followed her to the foyer, where she struggled with her coat. No one rose to help. Tell Simon I'll wait outside, she said to no one in particular. The night air felt like mercy against her burning cheeks. Eleanor descended the steps carefully, each one carrying her further from the family that seemed to have forgotten who she was, who they were. Mrs. Hayes? Eleanor? She turned to find Samuel Whitaker, the bank manager, standing near the hedgerow. His silver hair caught the porch light, his expression serious yet gentle. Mr. Whitaker, what brings you here? I was dropping off some papers for Richard. He glanced back at the house, then lowered his voice. Eleanor, I need to speak with you privately tomorrow morning about Harold's estate. Harold's estate? She repeated. First thing tomorrow, my office. His eyes held something she couldn't quite name, concern, perhaps, or urgency. It's important, Eleanor. Very important. Morning light streamed through Eleanor's kitchen window as she stirred her tea, watching the steam curl upward. She'd barely slept, Mr. Whitaker's words echoing through the night. What could possibly be so important about Harold's estate when Richard had made it painfully clear there was nothing left? She dressed with care, her navy dress, sensible shoes, the pearl earrings Harold had given her on their 30th anniversary. The familiar ritual steadied her hands. Just listen, then come home, she told her reflection. Don't get your hopes up. The 6-block walk to Maplewood Bank felt longer than usual. Twice she nearly turned back, convinced Mr. Whitaker had merely pitied her, that this meeting would only confirm what Richard had already declared. But Harold's voice seemed to guide her forward. Keep going, Ellie. Maplewood Bank stood like a sentinel at the corner of Main and Oak, its limestone facade unchanged since Harold had first opened their account 50 years ago. Eleanor climbed the steps slowly, her heart fluttering against her ribs. The receptionist looked up with surprise. Mrs. Hayes, Mr. Whitaker mentioned you'd be coming. Let me take you right back. The mahogany-paneled office felt too grand for whatever scraps of Harold's finances remained to discuss. Mr. Whitaker rose immediately, his face solemn yet kind. Eleanor, thank you for coming. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. Can I get you anything? Water? Coffee? No, thank you. She folded her hands in her lap to hide their trembling. You mentioned Harold's estate? Mr. Whitaker nodded, reaching for a leather portfolio. What I'm about to share with you was arranged by Harold over 30 years ago, with strict instructions about timing and confidentiality. From the portfolio, he withdrew a sealed envelope, yellowed slightly with age, Harold's handwriting unmistakable across the front. For Eleanor, when the time comes, Harold left this in the bank's custody, Mr. Whitaker explained, with instructions that I personally deliver it to you 1 month after his passing. Eleanor accepted the envelope, her fingertips tracing Harold's familiar script. The seal broke with a soft crack. My dearest Ellie, if you're reading this, I've gone ahead of you, just as we always feared I might. Don't be angry that I kept secrets. Some truths needed protecting from greed, from jealousy, most of all from those who might hurt you to get what they want. Our children grew up with advantages we never had, but somewhere along the way, They learn the wrong lessons. I've watched Richard's ambition harden into something ugly. I've seen how they treat you when they think I'm not looking. So I've made arrangements. Everything is in Samuel's hands now. Trust him, as I have. Remember our first apartment? How we counted pennies but never felt poor. That was real wealth, Ellie. What comes next is just paper. Use it wisely, use it kindly. All my love, forever, Harold. Tears blurred the words. Eleanor looked up to find Mr. Whitaker sliding a folder across the desk. Harold established a living trust in 1989, he explained. He funded it quietly over decades. He was extraordinarily successful in his investments. Eleanor opened the folder with unsteady hands. Pages of legal language swam before her eyes. You are the sole trustee, Mr. Whitaker continued. Harold was explicit that neither Richard nor any other family member should have access or control. How much? Eleanor whispered. Mr. Whitaker adjusted his glasses, pointing to a figure at the bottom of the statement. As of this morning, the trust holds assets totaling $200 million. Eleanor's hand flew to her mouth, a small gasp escaping. The room seemed to tilt slightly. $200 million, she repeated, Harold's last words echoing in her mind. Just paper, Ellie, just paper. The words hung in the air between them. $200 million. Eleanor's hand trembled as she placed Harold's letter back in its envelope. Why? Her voice barely rose above a whisper. Why didn't he tell me? All these years. Mr. Whitaker leaned forward, his eyes kind. Harold knew this question would come. He reached into the portfolio again, extracting another envelope. He asked me to give you this if you asked that exact question. Eleanor took the second letter with reverent hands. The seal broke with a soft tear. My dearest Ellie, you're wondering why I kept this secret, even from you. The truth is both simple and complicated. I wanted to protect you not just from our children's greed, but from the burden of knowing. Do you remember when that storm took our roof in '83? How you stood in the rain, directing neighbors with buckets and tarps? You never once mentioned the insurance money I'd set aside. You solved the problem with love and community first. That's why I trust you with this fortune. You'll use it as it should be used, not because it exists, but because your heart tells you how. I wanted you to find this only when you truly needed it, when life forced you to stand on your own. Because that's when your truest self emerges, Ellie. That's when you shine brightest. All my love, Harold. Tears splashed onto the paper. He knew, Eleanor whispered. He knew they would turn on me. Mr. Whitaker nodded solemnly. Harold was more perceptive than most gave him credit for. He came to me 30 years ago with concerns about Richard's character. Said his son had developed a hunger that wouldn't be satisfied. Eleanor folded the letter carefully, her mind reeling through decades of memories, Harold's careful bookkeeping, his modest lifestyle despite his business success, his insistence that they give anonymously to the church-building fund. What happens now? She asked. The trust is structured with you as the sole trustee. Mr. Whitaker slid another document forward. Harold left detailed instructions, but all decisions rest with you. There are no stipulations forcing you to share with family members. 200 million, Eleanor repeated, the number still impossible to grasp. We can meet next week to discuss investment strategies and distributions, Mr. Whitaker said gently. Today, I suggest you take time to process this. The account is completely secure. Eleanor gathered the papers with unsteady hands. Thank you, Samuel, for keeping his secret all these years. It was my honor, he replied, rising to walk her to the door. Harold was my friend before he was my client. He loved you very much, Eleanor. In the bank lobby, sunlight streamed through tall windows, catching dust motes in golden beams. Eleanor clutched her purse, now holding documents worth more money than she could comprehend. Everything looked different. The same polished floor she'd walked across thousands of times. The same tellers she'd greeted for decades, yet nothing was the same. Outside, spring air filled her lungs. Eleanor paused on the top step, watching Maplewood's Main Street bustle with ordinary Tuesday morning activity. Mrs. Peterson watered flowers outside her bakery. The postman waved as he made his rounds. A young mother pushed a stroller past the hardware store. Eleanor's legs felt unsteady as she descended the steps. Overnight, she had gone from an object of pity to one of the wealthiest people in the county. The weight of responsibility pressed against her chest alongside gratitude for Harold's foresight. What would you have me do with it all? She whispered to the blue sky, imagining Harold watching over her. A gentle breeze rustled the new leaves overhead, and for a moment she felt his presence. Trust your heart, Ellie. Always trust your heart. Eleanor had just finished making a cup of tea when the doorbell rang. Through the curtained window, she spotted Richard's luxury sedan parked in her driveway. She took a steadying breath and opened the door. "Mother." Richard flashed his practiced smile, the one he used for business meetings and country club gatherings. "I was in the neighborhood and wanted to check on you." Eleanor stepped aside. "Come in. I just made tea." Richard's eyes swept the modest living room, lingering on the worn furniture and faded curtains. "I've been thinking about our conversation last night. You seemed upset when you left." "Did I?" Eleanor poured tea into her second-best cup. Harold's words from the letter echoed in her mind as she watched her son's calculated movements. "The family is concerned about your financial situation." Richard accepted the tea but didn't drink it. "I've been looking into some assisted living facilities. Very affordable options." "That's thoughtful," Eleanor said, her voice steady despite the hurt. "But I'm comfortable here." Richard leaned forward. "Mother, I spoke with the bank this morning. They mentioned you had an appointment with Whitaker." Eleanor's heart skipped. So that was why he'd come. "Mr. Whitaker was a friend of your father's." "What did he want?" Richard asked, his casual tone betrayed by the intensity in his eyes. "Some paperwork needed signing." Eleanor sipped her tea. "Nothing important." Richard's jaw tightened. "Mother, I'm trying to help you. If there's anything from Dad's estate—" "Your father took care of me," Eleanor said simply. "I'll manage." After 20 more minutes of probing questions that yielded nothing, Richard left with obvious frustration. Eleanor watched through the window as he made a phone call in his car before driving away. That evening, as twilight settled over Maplewood, a gentle knock sounded at Eleanor's back door. She opened it to find Lily standing there, holding her 4-year-old son Jamie's hand. "Grandma," Lily's voice wavered. "I hope it's okay we came by." Eleanor's face lit up. "Lily!" She bent down to Jamie's eye level. "And look how big you've gotten." The boy smiled shyly, clutching a small toy truck. "I heard about last night," Lily said, following Eleanor into the kitchen. "Dad wouldn't let me come to dinner. Said I wasn't welcome." Eleanor squeezed her granddaughter's hand. "Their loss is my gain tonight." They prepared a simple meal together. Jamie perched on a stool pushing cookie cutters into biscuit dough while the women talked. Lily worked 2 jobs to support her son after the family had cut her off for refusing to marry Jamie's father. "They've treated you badly too," Eleanor said softly. Lily shrugged. "We manage. I'm more worried about you, Grandma. Are you really okay?" "I am," Eleanor said, surprised to find it true. "Your grandfather was wiser than anyone knew." After dinner, they played board games at the kitchen table. Jamie's laughter filled the house with a joy Eleanor hadn't felt in months. As the evening grew late, Lily gathered their things to leave. "We should do this more often," Lily said. "Jamie loves his great-grandma." "I'd like that very much," Eleanor replied. At the door, Lily wrapped her arms around Eleanor in a tight embrace. "I'm sorry about how they treated you. Are you sure you're all right?" Tears welled in Eleanor's eyes as she hugged her granddaughter back. "You're the only one who's asked how I am," she whispered. "Not what I have." The morning after Lily's visit, Eleanor was sipping coffee at her kitchen table when a sharp knock rattled her front door. Richard stood on her porch, his face tight with barely contained fury. "I've just spoken with our family attorney," he said, pushing past her into the house without waiting for an invitation. "He tells me Dad left some kind of secret trust fund." Eleanor's hand trembled slightly, but she kept her voice calm. "Your father made arrangements, yes. And you didn't think to mention this last night, when I specifically asked?" Richard's voice rose. "I'm the eldest son. I should be managing the family finances. Harold left specific instructions," Eleanor said, standing taller. "The trust is under my control." Richard laughed, a harsh sound. "You? You've never balanced a checkbook in your life. How much is it? 10,000? 50? Whatever it is, you need someone who understands money. Mr. Whitaker is helping me." Richard's face flushed red. "That decrepit old banker? Mother, be reasonable. Sign over management rights to me, and I'll make sure you're taken care of." Eleanor looked at her son, really looked at him. His expensive suit, the gold watch, the polished shoes, everything about him screamed wealth and power. But his eyes were cold, calculating. "No," she said quietly. "What did you say?" "I said no, Richard." Eleanor folded her hands. "Your father trusted me with this responsibility." Richard slammed his fist on the counter. "You stubborn old woman, you have no idea what you're doing. I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm honoring your father's wishes." "This isn't over," Richard snarled, storming toward the door. "You think you can handle this? You'll make a mess of everything. You'll come crawling back, begging for help." He paused at the doorway, his voice dropping dangerously low. "Mark my words, Mother. You'll regret this decision." The door slammed behind him. Eleanor sank into her chair, her heart pounding. She took several deep breaths, then reached for her purse and keys. Mrs. Hayes, Mr. Whitaker greeted her warmly, ushering her into his office. I expected we might see you today. Richard knows something, Eleanor said. He demanded I sign over the trust. Mr. Whitaker nodded gravely. Harold anticipated this. It's why he structured the trust as he did. He pulled out a folder. Perhaps now is a good time to review the conditions. For the next hour, Mr. Whitaker explained the trust's framework. The funds were divided into 4 categories: community development, education initiatives, healthcare assistance, and direct aid to individuals in need. Harold believed in lifting others up, Mr. Whitaker explained. He wanted the money to create opportunity, not dependency. Eleanor studied the documents, her mind whirling with possibilities. The old church needs a new roof, and the school library hasn't had new books in years. You have the authority to direct these funds wherever you see fit, Mr. Whitaker said, as long as they fulfill Harold's vision. On her walk home, Eleanor passed Martha Willis's house. Martha, a widow with 3 children, worked nights at the hospital cafeteria. Last winter, her youngest had developed pneumonia, resulting in a mountain of medical bill. That evening, Eleanor sat at Harold's desk, the checkbook from the trust open before her. A framed photo of Harold watched over her as she carefully wrote out her first check, enough to clear Martha's medical debt entirely. Is this right, Harold? She whispered to the empty room. A warm breeze rustled the curtains, and Eleanor felt a profound sense of peace settle over her. She could almost hear Harold's gentle voice. That's my Eleanor. With steady hands, she sealed the envelope, ready to deliver her first act of quiet generosity. Martha Willis stared at the envelope in disbelief, tears streaming down her face. The medical bill that had kept her awake at night for months, paid in full. But who would do this? She asked the hospital billing clerk. The woman smiled. The donor wished to remain anonymous. All I can say is, someone cares about you, Martha. By the end of the week, 3 more families in Maplewood received similar gifts. The Jenkins family's mortgage payment caught up after Mr. Jenkins lost his job at the factory. The Anderson twins got college application fees covered. Old Mr. Peterson's medication costs disappeared. Whispers spread through town like wildfire. Did you hear about the Willis family? Someone's looking out for this town. Must be an angel among us. Eleanor moved through her daily routine with quiet purpose. At the grocery store, she overheard conversations stop when she approached, followed by knowing smiles. She'd simply nod and continue shopping. One afternoon, Lily arrived at Eleanor's doorstep with a casserole and her young son. Grandma, she said, setting the dish on the counter. People are talking. They think you're behind the mysterious donations. Eleanor busied herself with the tea kettle. The Lord works in mysterious ways. Lily laughed, the sound brightening the kitchen. Grandma, it's okay. Your secret's safe with me. Later, they sat at the kitchen table, Lily's son playing with blocks on the floor. Eleanor showed Lily a list of families facing hardship. The church keeps track, Eleanor explained. Pastor Williams mentioned the Rodriguez family lost everything in that apartment fire last month. Lily studied the list. My friend Sarah works at their children's school. I could find out what they need most without raising suspicion. Eleanor reached across the table and squeezed Lily's hand. You have your father's heart, not Richard's. Dad always said you were the strong one. Lily's eyes glistened. I've missed you these past years. Those years are behind us now, Eleanor said firmly. For the next 2 weeks, grandmother and granddaughter formed a quiet partnership. Lily became Eleanor's eyes and ears, identifying genuine needs while Eleanor authorized the funds. Each night, Eleanor recorded every penny spent in a leather-bound ledger, honoring Harold's trust in her. The town began to transform. The church roof repair commenced. New books appeared in the school library. The community garden doubled in size. A free health clinic opened its doors one Saturday each month. Eleanor watched it all unfold from a distance, finding joy in others' happiness rather than recognition. Meanwhile, across town, Richard paced his home office, phone pressed to his ear. What do you mean you can't tell me? He snapped at his contact at Maplewood Bank. I'm her son. I have a right to know what's happening with my mother's accounts. He slammed the phone down, face contorted with rage. His wife appeared in the doorway. Something's not right, Richard seethed. Mother doesn't have this kind of money. Where is it coming from? People are saying she's behind all these charitable projects, his wife replied. The country club is buzzing about it. Richard grabbed his keys. I'm getting to the bottom of this. Mother's hiding something, and I won't stop until I find out what. He stormed out to his car, determination hardening his features as he pulled away. First stop, the county records office. Whatever game his mother was playing, it ended now. The moment Eleanor opened her door, she knew something was wrong. 5 stern faces stared back at her: Richard, his wife Pamela, her daughter Susan, Susan's husband Greg, and her youngest son Thomas. "We need to talk, Mother." Richard pushed past her into the living room without waiting for an invitation. The others filed in behind him, taking seats around her modest living room as if preparing for a tribunal. Eleanor straightened her cardigan, a calm settling over her despite the tension filling the room. "Would anyone like some tea?" she offered. "This isn't a social call." Pamela's voice cut through the air. "Richard has been investigating." Eleanor sat in Harold's old armchair, folding her hands in her lap. "Investigating what, exactly?" Richard leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "The church roof, the medical bills, the Rodriguez family's new apartment, scholarships appearing out of nowhere." He counted each item on his fingers, all mysteriously paid for within weeks of Dad's death. "Charitable acts are nothing to be ashamed of," Eleanor replied. Susan crossed her arms. "With what money, Mother? You were broke. You told us so yourself." "I never said I was broke." Eleanor's voice remained steady. "You all assumed that." The room fell silent. Eleanor could almost hear the gears turning in their heads. "So Dad left you money after all." Thomas, always the quietest of her children, finally spoke. "Why didn't you tell us?" "Because it wasn't your business," Eleanor said simply. Richard's face flushed crimson. "Not our business? We're your family." "Family?" Eleanor's eyebrow raised slightly. "The same family who laughed at me? Who suggested I sell my home and move to a nursing home? That family?" Pamela's jaw tightened. "You're being dramatic. We were concerned for your welfare." "No, you weren't." Eleanor's words carried no malice, just plain truth. "You saw me as a burden, not a person deserving of dignity." Richard stood abruptly. "How much did he leave you?" "That's between Harold and me." "I have a right to know." Richard's voice rose. "I'm his son." Eleanor remained seated, unruffled by his outburst. "Harold made his wishes clear. I'm respecting them." "This is ridiculous," Susan interjected. "We need to know for estate planning purposes, for tax considerations." "My affairs are in order," Eleanor replied. "Mr. Whitaker is handling everything appropriately." Greg, who had remained silent, suddenly leaned forward. "Whitaker, the bank manager, is that who's helping you hide assets from the family?" Eleanor's patience began to wane. "Nothing is hidden. It's simply not your concern. We'll see about that." Richard paced the small room. "I've already spoken to a lawyer. If you're mentally unfit to handle substantial assets, get out." Eleanor stood, her voice quiet but firm. "Mother," I said, "get out. All of you." She walked to the door and opened it. "When you're ready to treat me with respect, we can talk. Until then, my home and my finances are off limits to you." One by one, they filed out, muttering threats and promises to return. Richard was last, pausing at the threshold. "This isn't over, Mother." "No," Eleanor agreed. "I suspect it's just beginning." After closing the door, Eleanor leaned against it, her heart racing despite her outward calm. For the first time in her life, she'd stood her ground against her children's demands. The feeling was both exhilarating and terrifying. In the quiet of her home, she whispered, "Harold, give me strength. The wolves are circling." The following morning, Eleanor and Lily sat at the kitchen table, paper scattered across the worn oak surface. Steam rose from their coffee cups as they hunched over a legal pad filled with notes. "What about a scholarship for single parents?" Lily suggested, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Her 3-year-old daughter colored quietly in the corner. Eleanor's eyes brightened. Harold would have loved that. He always believed education was the key to breaking cycles. "We could start with 5 scholarships a year for Maplewood High graduates. Priority for those raising children." Eleanor jotted this down, her handwriting neat and precise. "And what about that empty storefront on Main Street? The one next to Miller's Pharmacy?" "Perfect location for the food pantry." Lily nodded. "Central, accessible, visible." "I want it to feel like a real grocery store," Eleanor said firmly. "No lines, no shame. Just neighbors helping neighbors." They spent hours refining each idea. The small business loan program would prioritize women entrepreneurs and veterans. The food pantry would include fresh produce from local farms. The scholarship would cover not just tuition but childcare expenses. Mr. Whitaker joined them after lunch, reviewing their plans with approving nods. "Harold would be proud," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "These programs hit every condition of the trust." "I just wish." Eleanor's voice trailed off. "What, Grandma?" Lily placed a hand over Eleanor's. "I wish the rest of the family could see the joy in giving rather than taking." She straightened her shoulders. "But we'll proceed without them." Across town, in the glass-walled office of Hartman Associates, Richard Hayes paced impatiently. I don't care what it costs, he snapped at the silver-haired attorney seated behind the mahogany desk. I want to know exactly how much money my mother has and where it's coming from. These investigations take time, Mr. Hayes, Lawrence Hartman replied coolly. Bank records don't simply appear because we want them. She's hiding something significant. The whole town's buzzing about her donations. Richard's jaw tightened. My father never had that kind of money. Perhaps you didn't know everything about your father's finances. Richard glared. I managed his investments for 20 years. Yet here we are, Hartman observed dryly. I'll expedite the investigation. But prepare yourself, we may discover your mother has resources you never knew existed. Just find me leverage, Richard muttered. She's 74, with no financial experience. This could be elder exploitation. Or dementia. Hartman's eyebrow raised slightly. Be careful making accusations without evidence, Mr. Hayes. That path leads to defamation suits. Later that afternoon, Eleanor's taxi turned onto her street after meeting with the bank's trust department. The setting sun cast long shadows across her modest yard, illuminating a familiar silver sedan parked half a block away. Richard's car, she murmured to herself. As her taxi approached, the sedan's engine started. Eleanor watched as her son pulled away without acknowledging her, turning the corner just as her taxi stopped at the curb. A chill ran through her as she paid the driver and walked to her front door. Something felt wrong. The welcome mat was slightly askew. Inserting her key, she realized the door wasn't fully locked. Eleanor stepped inside cautiously, her eyes scanning the living room. Nothing seemed obviously disturbed, but the hair on her arms stood on end. She moved toward Harold's old desk in the corner, pulled open the middle drawer. The spare key she kept hidden under the stationery was now sitting on top of it. Oh, Richard, she whispered, what have you done? The kitchen filled with the sweet aroma of apple cobbler as Eleanor pulled the bubbling dessert from the oven. Lily stood at the counter, slicing chicken for their simple dinner while her daughter Emma arranged napkins with meticulous 3-year-old precision. Perfect job, sweetheart, Eleanor said, smiling as Emma beamed with pride. They settled around the table, hands joined for grace. After the prayer, Lily served the food, her movements hesitant, her eyes occasionally darting to her grandmother's face. Something on your mind? Eleanor asked, passing the green beans. Lily pushed food around her plate. I'm worried, Grandma, about what Uncle Richard might do. I'm worried too, Eleanor admitted. He was in your house today. Without permission. Lily's voice hardened. That's breaking and entering. Eleanor sighed. Your uncle has always believed rules don't apply to him. Aren't you afraid? Lily reached across the table, her fingers brushing Eleanor's weathered hand. The way they're all turning against you, it must hurt so much. Eleanor's eyes drifted to Harold's photograph on the wall. In it, he stood beside their old fishing boat, laughing into the sunshine. Yes, it hurts. These are people I changed diapers for, stayed up nights with, sacrificed for. She squared her shoulders. But fear can't be what drives me now. Where do you find the courage? In Harold's love, Eleanor said simply. In the 47 years we shared, Harold taught me that doing what's right often means standing alone. She smiled at Emma, who was carefully eating one pea at a time. And I'm not really alone, am I? Lily's eyes glistened. No, you're not. Your grandfather once told me something I never forgot. He said, Eleanor, money reveals who people truly are, it doesn't change them. I'm seeing the truth of that now. Did Grandpa know this would happen? The family turning on you? Eleanor nodded slowly. He suspected. That's why he structured things this way to protect me, but also to give everyone a chance to show their true character. She reached for her water glass. Including me. What do you mean? This fortune isn't just a test for Richard and the others. It's a test for me too. Will I remain the woman Harold loved? Or will power change me? You could never be like Uncle Richard, Lily insisted. Everyone faces temptation, dear. The question is whether we recognize it. Eleanor smiled at her granddaughter. That's why I'm so grateful for you. You remind me of what matters. After dinner, Eleanor rinsed dishes while Lily dried. Emma sat at the table, coloring a picture of what appeared to be 3 stick figures holding hands. That's pretty, Eleanor said, peering over the child's shoulder. Who's that? You, me, and Mommy, Emma explained seriously. We're a family. The words caught in Eleanor's throat. Before she could respond, 3 sharp knocks rattled the front door. Were you expecting anyone? Lily whispered. Eleanor shook her head, drying her hands on her apron. The kitchen clock read 8:17 p.m., far too late for casual visitors. She moved toward the living room, Lily close behind. Through the peephole, Eleanor saw Richard's stern face flanked by two men in expensive suits, both carrying briefcases. One held what looked like official documents. "It's Richard," she whispered, her voice steadier than she felt. "With lawyers." Lily's hand found her grandmother's. "You don't have to open it." Eleanor took a deep breath, remembering Harold's words. "Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's facing fear with grace." "Yes, I do," she said, and turned the knob. Richard didn't wait for an invitation. He pushed past Eleanor into the living room, the two suited men following like obedient shadows. "Mother, this has gone far enough." His voice filled the small space. "You're clearly being manipulated by someone. These men are here to help." Eleanor stood her ground. "I don't need any help, Richard." "Mrs. Hayes," the taller lawyer stepped forward. "Your son is concerned about your sudden financial activities. He believes you may be under undue influence." "The only undue influence I'm under is standing right in front of me." Eleanor's voice remained quiet but firm. Lily moved to stand beside her grandmother. Emma clutched to her hip. Richard's eyes narrowed at his niece. "I should have known you'd be involved, always looking for a handout. That's enough." Eleanor's tone cut through the room. "You will not speak to Lily that way in my home." The second lawyer produced a document from his briefcase. "Mrs. Hayes, this is a petition for conservatorship. Your son believes you're no longer capable of managing your affairs." Eleanor's hands trembled slightly, but she clasped them together. "I see. Just sign here." Richard pointed to the bottom of the page. "It's for your own protection." "No." The word was simple but delivered with unmistakable resolve. "Mother." "I said no, Richard. I'm not signing anything." Richard's face flushed. "You don't understand what you're doing." "I understand perfectly well. Now please leave my home." "This isn't over," Richard hissed. "We can get this approved without your consent. The court will see that I'm right." Eleanor met his gaze. "You're welcome to try." She remained standing until the front door closed behind them. Only then did her shoulders slump, her composure cracking like thin ice. "Grandma?" Lily's voice seemed to come from far away. Eleanor's legs gave way. She sank into Harold's old armchair, tears spilling down her cheeks. How could he? The words caught in her throat. "My own son." Lily knelt beside the chair, taking Eleanor's weathered hands in hers. "He's blinded by greed. I changed his diapers. I sang him to sleep every night. The tears came faster now. I loved him with everything I had." "I know." Lily brushed a tear from Eleanor's cheek. "And that makes his betrayal worse." Emma toddled over, her small face serious. She climbed onto Eleanor's lap and patted her wet cheek. "Don't cry, Grandma." Eleanor hugged the child close, drawing strength from her innocent warmth. "What if they win?" she whispered. "What if they take everything Harold entrusted to me?" Lily's eyes flashed with determination. "They won't. We'll fight them. I'm so tired of fighting, Lily. I never wanted this." "The money or the fight?" "Both." Eleanor stroked Emma's hair. "I just wanted my family to love each other. Some of us still do." Lily squeezed Eleanor's hand. "Don't give up. That's what Richard wants for you to surrender." Later, after Lily and Emma had gone home, Eleanor moved slowly through her nighttime routine. The house felt emptier than usual, the silence heavy with the day's confrontation. She knelt beside her bed, the way she had every night for decades. The floorboards creaked beneath her aging knees, a familiar discomfort. "Lord," she whispered, "I don't know if I have the strength for what's coming. Richard was my firstborn. I held him before anyone else. And now—" Her voice broke. She closed her eyes, tears seeping through her lashes. "Give me courage. Show me the path forward. Not my will, but yours be done." The prayer wasn't elegant or long, but as Eleanor climbed into bed, she felt a small measure of peace settle over her. The storm was coming, but she wouldn't face it alone. Eleanor woke to sunlight streaming through her curtains. She hadn't slept well, but prayer had eased her troubled heart enough to grant her a few hours of rest. The memory of Richard's betrayal still stung, but she refused to let bitterness take root. She made her morning tea and carried it to the porch, savoring the crisp autumn air. Across the street, Mrs. Winters waved while tending her garden. Eleanor waved back, grateful for neighbors who knew nothing of her fortune or family troubles. The telephone rang inside. She set down her cup and hurried to answer it. "Grandma, it's me." Lily's voice was a balm. "Good morning, sweetheart. How's little Emma today?" "She's wonderful. Drawing pictures for you, actually." Lily paused. "How are you holding up?" Eleanor sighed. "One moment at a time. The Lord gives strength when we need it most. I've been thinking about what Richard's doing. Mr. Whitaker might know a good lawyer who could help us. Someone experienced with trusts and family disputes." Hope flickered in Eleanor's chest. That's a fine idea. Harold always said Mr. Whitaker was the smartest man he knew. I'll call him today. And, Grandma, you're not alone in this. After hanging up, Eleanor felt lighter. She hummed as she watered her houseplants, Harold's favorites that she'd kept alive since his passing. Maybe things would work out after all. With Lily's help and proper legal counsel, surely the truth would prevail. The doorbell interrupted her thoughts. Eleanor opened the door to find a stern-faced young man in a pressed suit. Mrs. Eleanor Hayes? Yes, that's me. He thrust an envelope toward her. You've been served. The man turned and walked away without another word, leaving Eleanor frozen in her doorway. The envelope felt unnaturally heavy in her hands. She closed the door slowly and carried it to the kitchen table, as if handling something that might explode. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. Legal language filled the pages, cold and impersonal. But certain phrases jumped out with terrible clarity. Mental competency hearing, emergency petition for conservatorship, temporary restraining order against financial decisions. Appear in court on October 15th. Eleanor's throat tightened. 2 weeks. She had 2 weeks before facing her children in court. 2 weeks before strangers would judge whether she was fit to manage her own affairs. The formal legal document listed her children as plaintiffs. Richard Hayes, Margaret Donovan, Thomas Hayes. All three of them united against her. Only Harold's brother Edward was absent from the list, though he'd always lived too far away to be involved in family matters. Eleanor picked up the phone to call Lily, then set it down again. Her granddaughter had already done so much. She needed time to process this herself first. The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the silence. Outside, life continued. Birds sang, neighbors chatted, cars passed. But inside Eleanor's small house, time seemed suspended. She made a cup of tea that grew cold on the table. Night fell, and still she sat, reading and rereading the summons. The overhead light cast harsh shadows across the document. Eleanor traced Harold's name on her wedding ring, wishing he were here to guide her. What would he say? What would he do? Her hands trembled as she set the papers down. The magnitude of what lay ahead crashed over her, facing her children in court, having her sanity questioned, possibly losing control of Harold's legacy. Oh, Harold, she whispered into the empty kitchen. I don't know if I'm strong enough for this fight. Eleanor pushed herself up from the kitchen table, the court summons left behind like a bad dream. I can't just sit here worrying, she murmured. She had 2 weeks, and they wouldn't be spent in fear. The next morning, Eleanor made her way to Maplewood High School with a thick folder of scholarship plans. Principal Jenkins welcomed her with genuine warmth. Mrs. Hayes, I can't thank you enough for what you're doing. These scholarships will change lives. Eleanor smiled, her worries momentarily forgotten. Education was always important to Harold. He'd be pleased. They toured the campus together, stopping at classrooms where teenagers looked up with curious eyes. In the art room, Eleanor paused to admire a student's painting. That's beautiful, she told the shy girl. You have a real gift. Thanks, the girl whispered. I want to study art in college, but my parents can't afford it. Eleanor exchanged glances with Principal Jenkins. Well, perhaps that might change soon. Word spread quickly. By lunchtime, students gathered around Eleanor in the cafeteria, asking about the scholarships. Their eager faces and hopeful questions lifted her spirits. These young people weren't interested in her bank balance or mental competency. They simply saw someone who believed in them. A boy with worn shoes and a determined expression approached her last. Ma'am, is it true you're setting up scholarships for trades too? Not just college? Absolutely. College isn't for everyone. Harold always said a skilled tradesperson was worth their weight in gold. The boy's face lit up. I want to be an electrician like my grandfather. Later that afternoon, Eleanor walked downtown where Mr. Whitaker had helped her arrange funding for struggling businesses. Shop owners waved through windows. Mrs. Collins from the bakery rushed out with a box of fresh muffins. For you, Eleanor, a small thanks for saving my shop. Every grateful smile strengthened Eleanor's resolve. This was Harold's vision, not hoarding wealth, but sharing it to lift others. Back home, Lily arrived with her son Ethan and boxes of decorations. What's all this? Eleanor asked. For the community festival you're planning. I figured we could start decorating the community center early. Eleanor blinked in surprise. How did you know about that? I only discussed it with Mr. Whitaker yesterday. Lily grinned. Small towns, Grandma. Besides, I volunteered to help organize. This festival will show everyone what you're really about. They spent the evening sorting decorations at Eleanor's kitchen table. Ethan colored banners while Eleanor and Lily planned activities and food vendors. Laughter filled the small house as they worked. You know, Eleanor said softly, this reminds me of when your mother was little. We used to craft together just like this. Lily squeezed her grandmother's hand. This is what family should be. For the first time in years, Eleanor felt the warmth of true family surrounding her. Not the cold calculations of Richard and the others, but genuine love and shared purpose. As twilight settled over Maplewood, Eleanor stood on her porch, watching Lily buckle Ethan into his car seat. Her heart felt full despite the challenges ahead. Across the street, obscured by shadows and parked behind a large hedge, sat Richard's sleek black car. He gripped the steering wheel tightly, watching the domestic scene unfold. His mother's newfound popularity in town had reached his ears, along with rumors of a community festival that would showcase her generosity. Enjoy it while it lasts, he muttered, pulling out his phone to call his lawyer. The court date couldn't come soon enough. Whatever his mother had stumbled into, whatever wealth she'd mysteriously acquired, he would make sure it ended up where it belonged, under his control. Richard started his engine and drove away, determination hardening his features. His mother's little reign of generosity would soon come to an end. The festival day dawned bright and clear, as if even the weather approved of Eleanor's vision. The town square transformed overnight. Colorful banners fluttered between lampposts. Local vendors arranged their stalls in a welcoming circle, and children darted about with painted faces and cotton candy. Eleanor stood at the center of it all, her simple blue dress a stark contrast to the elaborate decorations surrounding her. Mr. Whitaker approached, beaming. Harold would be proud, he said quietly, patting her hand. This is exactly what he hoped you'd do. Tears pricked at Eleanor's eyes. I feel him here today. The morning passed in a blur of introductions and thank yous. Eleanor lost count of the hugs she received, the stories of gratitude that poured forth from townspeople whose lives she'd touched. Young scholarship recipients proudly wore badges identifying them as Hayes Scholars. Veterans gathered near the food trucks, their medical bills now paid, their dignity restored. By mid-afternoon, a local band struck up a playful tune. Eleanor sat watching the makeshift dance floor fill with laughing couples and children. Dance, Grandma! Little Ethan appeared before her, his 5-year-old face serious with purpose as he extended his small hand. Oh, sweetheart, I don't think these old bones, please? His eyes, so like Harold's, melted her resistance. Eleanor allowed herself to be pulled to the dance floor. Ethan stood on her shoes as she swayed gently, his little arms stretched upward to hold her hands. The crowd formed a circle around them, applauding. A warmth enveloped Eleanor that had nothing to do with the afternoon sundae. For a breathtaking moment, she felt Harold's presence so strongly she nearly turned to look for him. The sensation wrapped around her, like an embraced pride, love, and approval radiating through her very being. Harold, she whispered, we did it. When the music ended, Ethan hugged her legs tightly. I love you, Grandma. Those 4 simple words healed something deep within Eleanor's heart. The mockery at Richard's dinner table seemed a distant memory now. Here, surrounded by genuine affection, she had found her place again. As dusk approached, townspeople gathered for the closing ceremony. Lily helped Eleanor onto the small stage where she would thank everyone for coming. The crowd's warmth radiated back at her, faces upturned in admiration and respect. Eleanor stepped to the microphone. Friends and neighbors, if I might interrupt. Richard's voice cut through the air like a knife. Eleanor froze as her son climbed the steps to the stage, 2 men in suits following closely behind. His expression was all false concern, his voice pitched to carry. I apologize for this public announcement, but it concerns everyone here. Richard took the microphone, positioning himself between Eleanor and the crowd. My family and I have filed a petition with the court regarding my mother's mental competency. Gasps rippled through the gathering. Eleanor felt the blood drain from her face. We believe she's being manipulated by certain parties, Richard continued, glancing pointedly at Mr. Whitaker, who have taken advantage of her vulnerability after my father's death. That's not true, Eleanor whispered, but without the microphone, her words vanished into the evening air. The hearing is scheduled for next week, where we'll ask the court to appoint a guardian to protect both her and her assets. Richard's voice dripped with manufactured sympathy. For her own good, of course. The festival's joy collapsed like a punctured balloon. Confused murmurs spread through the crowd as people exchanged uncertain glances, their easy happiness replaced by uncomfortable tension. Eleanor stood motionless, publicly humiliated once again, the brief peace she'd found shattered by her son's calculated cruelty. The crowd shifted uncomfortably, voices rising in a confused murmur. Eleanor felt Lily's arm wrapped protectively around her shoulders. Grandma, let's go, Lily whispered, guiding her down the stage steps. Richard continued speaking, his voice carrying across the square. My mother has been making erratic financial decisions. We're concerned for her well-being. As Eleanor and Lily walked through the parting crowd, Eleanor caught fragments of conversations. She seemed perfectly fine to me, but what if she is being manipulated? Richard always was after his father's money. By morning, the gossip had spread through Maplewood like wildfire. Eleanor walked to the corner store for milk, feeling eyes follow her progress down the sidewalk. Conversations halted when she approached, only to resume in hushed tones when she passed. Mrs. Peterson, who ran the flower shop, crossed the street to avoid her. Eleanor's heart sank. Mrs. Peterson's daughter had received one of Eleanor's first scholarships. At the store, Eleanor stood in line behind two women from her church. "I heard Richard say she's been giving away thousands without remembering," one whispered, "signing checks and forgetting she did it the next day. Such a shame. My cousin's mother got that way. Started out just forgetting little things, then—" Eleanor cleared her throat. The women turned, faces flushing with embarrassment. "Good morning," Eleanor said quietly. They mumbled replies and hurried out. Mr. Collins, the store owner, gave her a sympathetic smile. "Don't mind them, Eleanor. Those two wouldn't recognize true generosity if it knocked on their front door." "Thank you, Tom." Eleanor walked home, clutching her single bag, her shoulders heavy. Outside the diner, a small crowd gathered around Richard, who held court at an outdoor table. "The doctors say early dementia often presents this way," Richard's voice carried. "Reckless spending, poor judgment. We just want to protect Mom from herself." Eleanor quickened her pace, but not before several people turned to stare. Back home, the phone rang. It was Mr. Whitaker. "Eleanor, Richard's been at the bank this morning, telling anyone who'll listen that you're not competent. I've refused to discuss your accounts, but he's pressuring employees for information. Can he access anything? No, the trust is ironclad. But—" Mr. Whitaker hesitated. "He's creating doubt. People are starting to wonder." After hanging up, Eleanor sank into Harold's old armchair. The doorbell rang. She hesitated before answering. Pastor Jim stood on her porch, his weathered face creased with concern. "I came to check on you." Eleanor invited him in, grateful for his presence. "Half the congregation is furious with Richard," he said, accepting a cup of tea. "The other half doesn't know what to believe." "What do you think, Pastor?" He studied her face. "I think Harold knew exactly what he was doing when he left you in charge." By evening, Eleanor's phone had rung a dozen times, some calls supportive, others awkwardly inquiring about her health. Lily arrived with dinner, reporting that Richard had visited the school, telling teachers to keep an eye on how Eleanor interacted with Ethan. "He's saying you might be a danger to your own grandson," Lily said, fury in her eyes. That night, Eleanor lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The familiar sounds of crickets chirping outside her window brought no comfort. Her hands trembled slightly on the bedspread as she contemplated the court hearing ahead. For the first time since discovering the trust, doubt crept in. What if Richard convinced the judge? What if all her plans for the town, for Lily and Ethan, were taken away? The community's tentative faith in her already showed cracks. Eleanor closed her eyes, but sleep remained distant. The cricket song continued, indifferent to her fear, as tears slipped silently down her temples and into her gray hair. Morning light streamed through the blinds as Eleanor smoothed her navy dress, checking her reflection one last time. She'd chosen her most dignified outfit, the one she'd worn to Harold's funeral. Her hands trembled as she fastened her pearl earrings. A gentle knock at the door announced Lily's arrival. "You look beautiful, Grandma," Lily said, stepping inside. She wore a simple blouse and skirt, her hair pulled back neatly. "I feel like I'm going to be sick," Eleanor admitted. Lily squeezed her hand. "Remember what Mr. Whitaker said. The trust is solid." Harold made sure of it. The drive to the county courthouse passed in silence. Eleanor watched familiar streets roll by, wondering if this would be her last day of independence. Outside the courthouse steps, a small gathering of townspeople had assembled. Mrs. Jenkins from the library waved encouragingly. The high school principal nodded respectfully. "Looks like you have supporters," Lily whispered. They climbed the stone steps slowly, Eleanor's arthritis protesting with each rise. Inside, the marble hallway echoed with footsteps and hushed conversations. They found the correct courtroom and settled into wooden benches. At 5 minutes to 9, Richard strode in flanked by 3 men in expensive suits. His hair was freshly cut, his posture radiating confidence. He glanced at Eleanor without expression, then leaned to whisper something to the youngest lawyer, who smirked. "Don't let him intimidate you," Lily murmured. "That's what he wants." Mr. Whitaker arrived moments later with the bank's attorney, nodding reassuringly to Eleanor. The clock ticked forward, each minute stretching impossibly long. At precisely 9, the bailiff called out, "All rise." The judge entered, a stern-faced woman with silver-streaked hair and wire-rimmed glasses. Judge Patricia Harmon had a reputation for fairness, but tolerance for neither nonsense nor wasted time. Be seated, she commanded, opening a folder. Hayes Family Trust Dispute, case number 47,392. Eleanor's throat tightened. She glanced across the aisle where Richard sat, perfectly composed, his lawyers arranging documents with practiced efficiency. Before we begin, Judge Harmon said, I want to clarify the purpose of today's hearing. We are determining whether Eleanor Hayes is mentally competent to manage the Harold Hayes Trust, as established by her late husband. She peered over her glasses directly at Richard. This is not about asset distribution or altering the terms of the trust itself. Richard's lead attorney stood. Your Honor, will demonstrate that Mrs. Hayes has shown erratic judgment, making financially unsound decisions that indicate cognitive decline. We're requesting temporary guardianship to protect both her interests and the trust's assets. Eleanor felt the blood drain from her face. Temporary guardianship. Richard would control everything. The judge turned toward Eleanor's side. Mr. Whitaker's attorney rose. Your Honor, will prove that Mrs. Hayes is not only competent, but acting explicitly within the guidelines established by her late husband. The petitioner's claims are without merit and appear motivated by self-interest. Judge Harmon nodded, making a note. We'll proceed with opening statements, then hear testimony. First witness will be the petitioner, Richard Hayes. Eleanor watched Richard straighten his tie, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. He looked utterly certain of victory. Mrs. Eleanor Hayes, the judge said suddenly, her gaze direct and penetrating. This hearing centers on your capacity. I'd like you to understand that I'll be observing you carefully throughout these proceedings. Eleanor nodded, her mouth dry. The courtroom seemed to shrink around her. Every eye on her face, her reactions, her smallest movements now evidence for or against her. The court calls Richard Hayes to the stand, the bailiff announced. Eleanor took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. This was the fight of her life. Richard took the stand with a practiced air of concern. He spoke in measured tones about Eleanor's sudden erratic behavior and concerning spending patterns, painting a picture of a confused elderly woman who needed protection from herself. She's giving away thousands to random people, he said, shaking his head sadly. Dad would never have wanted his life savings squandered like this. Eleanor's hands tightened around Harold's pocket watch. Each word felt like a knife twisting deeper. Behind Richard's performance of concern, she glimpsed the cold calculation in his eyes. His lawyers presented bank statements, highlighting withdrawals and donations. They called Eleanor's doctor, who reluctantly admitted he hadn't evaluated her cognitive function recently. They even brought in Eleanor's daughter-in-law, who tearfully described Eleanor as not the same since Harold died. When Richard's side finished, Eleanor felt hollowed out. The courtroom took a collective breath as Mr. Whitaker's attorney, a woman named Miss Collins, stood. Your Honor, I'd like to call Eleanor Hayes to the stand. Eleanor's legs felt wooden as she made her way forward. After being sworn in, she sat with her back straight, hands folded in her lap. Mrs. Hayes, Miss Collins began gently, could you explain to the court the nature of the charitable work you've been doing? Eleanor cleared her throat. Harold and I always believed in helping others. The trust has specific guidelines: education, community support, healthcare assistance. Everything I've done follows those principles. And these decisions, were they impulsive or planned? Each one was carefully considered, Eleanor replied. Mr. Whitaker helps me ensure everything is properly documented. When Richard's lawyer cross-examined her, his questions grew increasingly aggressive, trying to confuse her dates and numbers. Eleanor took her time, answering clearly, refusing to be rattled. Next came a parade of witnesses Eleanor hadn't expected. The high school principal described the scholarship program that kept 3 students from dropping out. Pastor Williams detailed how the church roof repair had saved their historic building. A young mother wept as she explained how Eleanor had covered her daughter's emergency surgery. Most surprising was Frank Miller, the factory owner, who testified that Eleanor's business loan program had saved 35 jobs in Maplewood. Without Mrs. Hayes, half this town would be unemployed, he stated firmly. That's not senility, that's strategic community investment. Throughout the testimony, the judge watched Eleanor closely, noting her reactions, her composure. Richard grew increasingly agitated, whispering furiously to his lawyers. The final witness was Mr. Whitaker himself. In 40 years of banking, he said, looking directly at the judge, I've never seen someone handle sudden wealth with more wisdom and restraint than Eleanor Hayes. Every decision she's made has been sound, documented, and precisely in line with the trust's intended purpose. He turned toward Eleanor. Harold knew exactly what he was doing when he named her the trustee. Judge Harmon checked her watch. We'll take a 30-minute recess and then hear closing arguments. As the courtroom emptied, Eleanor remained seated, emotionally drained. Lily brought her a cup of water. "You did wonderfully," she whispered. "I never knew," Eleanor murmured. "I never knew how many people cared." Across the room, Richard stood huddled with his lawyers, their expressions tense. "Whatever happens next," Eleanor said, straightening her shoulders, "Harold would be proud today." The testimonies had done more than defend her competence, they'd validated her purpose. For the first time since entering the courthouse, Eleanor felt the faint stirring of hope. The ancient courthouse clock ticked steadily as Mr. Whitaker approached the bench, Harold's letters clutched in his weathered hands. Eleanor watched, her heart pounding against her ribs like a caged bird. Lily squeezed her grandmother's hand. "Your Honor, before his death, Harold Hayes entrusted me with these letters, to be opened only if his wife's authority over the trust was ever challenged." Richard shifted in his seat, his lawyer whispering urgently in his ear. The judge nodded. "You may proceed." Mr. Whitaker broke the seal on the first envelope and unfolded yellowed paper covered in Harold's familiar handwriting. His voice filled the hushed courtroom. "My dearest Eleanor, if you're hearing these words, it means our son Richard has done exactly what I feared he might. I've known for years about his schemes, his manipulation, his hunger for what isn't his." A collective gasp rippled through the gallery. Eleanor closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. "When Richard came to me in 2012, claiming to need an emergency loan for his business, I provided it only to discover he'd spent it on a vacation home in the Bahamas he never told anyone about." Richard lurched forward. "That's a lie." "Mr. Hayes, control yourself," the judge warned, his gaze steely. Mr. Whitaker continued reading. "In 2015, when he convinced me to invest in his friend's startup, I later learned he'd pocketed half the money himself. Each time I forgave him, hoping he'd change." Eleanor stared at her son, seeing him clearly perhaps for the first time. His face had transformed into a mask of rage and fear. "The final straw came when I discovered Richard had been systematically draining funds from our family accounts, creating the illusion that our savings were disappearing. My investigation revealed he'd already stolen nearly 300, zero over 5 years. Murmurs erupted throughout the courtroom. The judge banged his gavel once. "Rather than expose him and destroy our family, I created this trust in secret, ensuring that the fortune I'd built would remain protected from his greed. I named Eleanor sole trustee because in 52 years of marriage she never once put money above love." Lily wrapped her arm around Eleanor's shoulders as she quietly wept. "Richard believes wealth equals worth. Eleanor knows better. She understands that compassion is our true legacy. I trust her judgment completely and without reservation." Mr. Whitaker pulled out a second letter. "This contains detailed records of Richard's financial manipulations, with dates, amounts, and account numbers, all verified by independent auditors." Richard shot to his feet. "This is slander. My father was old and confused." "Mr. Hayes!" The judge's voice cracked like thunder. "One more outburst and I'll hold you in contempt." Richard sank back into his chair, his face flushed crimson with fury. His eyes, so like Harold's in color but lacking their kindness, burned into Eleanor with naked hatred. The judge reviewed the documents, his expression growing grimmer with each page. The courtroom remained utterly silent. "Mr. Hayes," the judge finally said, looking directly at Richard, "these are serious allegations that may warrant criminal investigation." He turned to Eleanor with softened eyes. "Mrs. Hayes, I see no evidence whatsoever supporting the claim that you are unfit to manage this trust." Richard's face twisted with rage. His fists clenched white-knuckled on the table before him. "Mr. Hayes, I strongly advise you to remain silent," the judge warned, his voice edged with steel. The courtroom erupted into chaos. Scattered applause broke out from the townsfolk who'd come to support Eleanor. Others whispered in shocked tones, their heads bent together as they processed Harold's revelations. The judge banged his gavel repeatedly. "Order! I will have order in my courtroom!" The noise settled to a low murmur. Eleanor sat perfectly still, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. Not tears of sorrow or fear, but of vindication of Harold's faith in her being affirmed before the world. Lily's warm hand covered hers, their fingers intertwined in silent solidarity. In light of the evidence presented, this court finds no basis whatsoever for removing Mrs. Eleanor Hayes from her position as trustee. The judge peered over his glasses at Richard. "Furthermore, I'm dismissing this case with prejudice and ordering Mr. Richard Hayes to pay all court costs." Richard shot to his feet, his face contorted in rage. "This is ridiculous. My father was—" "Mr. Hayes!" The judge's voice cut through the air like a whip. "You've heard my ruling. I suggest you accept it with whatever dignity you can muster." Richard glared at Eleanor, his eyes burning with hatred and humiliation. Without another word, he snatched his jacket from the back of his chair and stormed down the aisle. The heavy courtroom door slammed behind him with a thunderous bang that echoed through the chamber. The judge turned to Eleanor, his expression softening. "Mrs. Hayes, this court apologizes for the distress this proceeding has caused you. You are free to continue your excellent work in the community." Eleanor nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Mr. Whitaker approached, placing Harold's letters gently in her hands. "He always believed in you," Mr. Whitaker said softly, "even when you didn't believe in yourself." Eleanor clutched the letters to her chest. "Thank you, Thomas, for everything." People surrounded her as she stood, neighbors, shopkeepers, students she'd helped, families whose lives she'd quietly changed. They offered handshakes, hugs, and words of support. The mayor himself came forward to shake her hand, publicly thanking her for saving the town's historic library. Through it all, Lily remained by her side, a steady presence amid the swirl of well-wishers. "I think Grandpa would be proud," Lily whispered. Eleanor squeezed her granddaughter's hand. "He'd be proud of you too, dear. So very proud." As the crowd thinned, Eleanor felt an overwhelming need for fresh air. She and Lily walked together through the courthouse's grand hallway, past the marble columns and beneath the soaring ceilings. Eleanor's steps grew lighter with each passing moment, as if a great weight had been lifted from her shoulders. They pushed through the heavy doors and stepped outside. The afternoon sun bathed the courthouse steps in golden light. Eleanor closed her eyes, tilting her face upward. The warmth caressed her skin like a gentle touch. She took a deep breath, filling her lungs with sweet spring air. Birds sang in the maple trees lining the square. In the distance, children laughed in the park she'd helped restore. Eleanor opened her eyes, gazing at the clear blue sky. For a moment, just a heartbeat, she felt Harold's presence, stronger than ever before, not as a ghost or vision, but as a certainty in her heart. He was watching, he was smiling, he had always believed. "Are you all right, Grandma?" Lily asked softly. Eleanor nodded, peace settling over her like a familiar blanket. "Yes, dear, for the first time in a very long while, I truly am." In the days that followed, Eleanor noticed a shift in how the townspeople of Maplewood regarded her. The whispers had changed, no longer pitying murmurs about poor widow Hayes, but expressions of genuine admiration and respect. She couldn't walk down Main Street without someone stopping to thank her, share a story, or simply squeeze her hand in silent appreciation. At Maplewood Bakery, Mrs. Finch insisted Eleanor take a fresh loaf of sourdough on the house. When Eleanor protested, the baker simply smiled. "You paid my Tommy's medical bills when we thought we'd lose everything. Bread's the least I can do." At the post office, the clerk handed Eleanor her mail with reverence, whispering, "My daughter got your scholarship, Mrs. Hayes. She starts college in September, first in our family." These moments touched Eleanor deeply, but what truly healed her heart came 3 days after the trial, when Lily's car pulled into her driveway. The front door barely opened before 6-year-old Noah burst through, racing toward Eleanor with arms outstretched. "Grandma, Grandma, Mom says we can visit whenever we want now." Eleanor knelt despite her creaky knees, enfolding the boy in her arms. The word Grandma echoed in her ears like the sweetest music. For years, Richard had kept Lily and Noah away, embarrassed by his unmarried daughter and her child. Now, hearing Noah call her by that precious title-filled spaces, in her heart she thought would remain empty forever. "I brought cookies," Lily said, holding up a tin as she followed her son inside. Noah helped. "They're chocolate chip with extra chips," Noah announced proudly. "Mom says they're your favorite." "They absolutely are." Eleanor pressed a kiss to his forehead. "And do you know what goes perfectly with chocolate chip cookies? Hot chocolate with tiny marshmallows." Noah's eyes widened. "Do you have tiny marshmallows? I might have bought some specially for my favorite grandson." Later, as Lily helped clean the kitchen, she hesitated by the sink. "I was thinking, Grandma, the apartment Noah and I rent is so small, and you have all these rooms." Eleanor set down her dish towel. "Lily Hayes, are you asking if you can move in with your old grandmother?" "Only if the answer is yes." Eleanor's voice caught. "Nothing would make me happier." That evening, after Lily and Noah had gone home to pack their belongings, Eleanor sat at her bedroom desk. The house felt different, already lighter, filled with possibility. She opened the journal Harold had given her on their last anniversary, its leather cover worn soft with handling. She uncapped her pen and began to write. "My dearest Harold, today our great-grandson called me Grandma for the first time. If you could have seen his smile so much like yours." Lily and Noah are moving in this weekend. Our home will be filled with laughter again. The money has done good, Harold, just as you hoped. Children with futures, families with homes, our town breathing new life. But your greatest gift wasn't the money. It was your belief in me when I'd stopped believing in myself. Tomorrow, we break ground on the Harold Hayes Community Center. I wish you could see the plans. There's a library wing, art studios, and a garden where people can sit and remember what matters most. I promise to honor your legacy until my last breath, not just with buildings or programs, but by loving as you love completely and without condition. Thank you for choosing me as your partner in this life and beyond. All my love, Eleanor. She closed the journal gently and turned off the lamp. Outside her window, stars twinkled in the vast darkness. Eleanor smiled. Somewhere among them, Harold was smiling back. The groundbreaking ceremony for the Harold Hayes Community Center took place on a crisp autumn morning. Maple trees surrounding the vacant lot blazed with crimson and gold, their leaves occasionally drifting down onto the shoulders of gathered townspeople. Eleanor stood behind a podium, her silver hair catching the sunlight, as she addressed the crowd. "This center belongs to all of us," she said, her voice carrying across the field. "It's about second chances and new beginnings." What surprised Eleanor most wasn't the size of the crowd. Nearly half the town had shown up, but who stood among them? Richard's wife Diane hovered near the back, eyes downcast, but present nonetheless. Eleanor's other son Michael, who had remained silent during the court proceedings, stood with his teenage children. Even Mrs. Winters from the garden club, who had laughed loudest at Richard's dinner party, now clutched a shovel, ready to dig the ceremonial first scoop of earth. After the speeches, Eleanor moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations and well wishes. Michael approached, hands shoved deep in his pockets. "Mom, I should have stood up for you. I'm sorry." Eleanor studied his face, so much like Harold's, but missing her husband's warmth. Still, she saw something new there. Humility. "There's a volunteer sign-up sheet by the refreshment table," she said simply. Michael nodded, understanding the olive branch for what it was. Later that afternoon, as volunteers marked boundaries and architects reviewed plans with the construction foreman, Lily appeared at Eleanor's side with 2 cups of coffee. "The volunteer list is full through December," Lily said, handing her grandmother the steaming cup, "even for the unglamorous jobs like clearing debris and painting baseboards." Eleanor watched as former bank teller Mrs. Peterson hammered stakes into the ground alongside the high school football captain. The town mayor carried lumber with Mr. Diaz, who'd lost his factory job last year and received one of Eleanor's first business loans to start his landscaping company. "It's not about the money anymore," Eleanor murmured. "They're here because they want to be part of something bigger than themselves." "They're here because of you, Grandma," Lily corrected gently. "You showed them what community really means." By sunset, most volunteers had dispersed, promising to return tomorrow. Construction equipment stood silhouetted against the darkening sky, ready for morning. Eleanor waved as Lily drove away with Noah, who had spent the afternoon supervising with impressive seriousness. Alone now, Eleanor walked the perimeter of what would soon become the community center. Her feet crunched on fallen leaves as she paused at each corner, visualizing the finished building. Here would be the library, there the art room, beyond that the garden, with benches where people could sit and talk or simply be still together. The evening star appeared overhead as Eleanor reached the center of the property. She closed her eyes, feeling the solid earth beneath her feet and the gentle breeze against her cheeks. For a moment, she could almost sense Harold beside her, his hand steady on her shoulder. "This is for you, Harold," she whispered into the gathering darkness. "But it's also for all of us. You always said wealth meant nothing unless it created something meaningful." She opened her eyes, smiling at the empty field that would soon transform. "I think we're finally getting it right." A leaf spiraled down, landing at her feet deep red like Harold's favorite sweater. Eleanor picked it up, tucked it into her pocket, and turned toward home, her heart full. Richard's Mercedes was nowhere to be seen at the groundbreaking, nor did he answer Eleanor's courtesy call about the center's progress. His Christmas card, a generic photo of his family with printed signatures, arrived weeks late, forwarded from his new address 3 towns over. Eleanor tucked it into her Bible without comment. Her other children maintained cautious distance. They sent stilted birthday wishes and made brief appearances at holidays, their conversations strained with unspoken regret. Eleanor welcomed them with grace but no longer chased their approval. The court proceedings had drawn clear lines that wouldn't easily fade. "They'll come around when they're ready," Eleanor told Lily one afternoon as they sorted through donated books for the center's library. "Or they won't. Either way, life continues." Lily nodded, shelving a weathered copy of To Kill a Mockingbird. Noah asked why Uncle Richard doesn't visit anymore. "What did you tell him?" "That sometimes grown-ups make mistakes they're not ready to fix." Lily paused, balancing a stack of children's picture books. "Was that wrong?" Eleanor smiled, touching her granddaughter's arm. "It was honest. Honesty is a gift you're giving him." Their Tuesdays became sacred grandmother and granddaughter sharing lunch at Eleanor's kitchen table before heading to the construction site together. As the center's walls rose and windows were installed, their conversations deepened. "I was so afraid when I found out I was pregnant," Lily confessed one day as they watched workers install the center's roof. "Everyone told me I'd ruined my life." Eleanor squeezed her hand. "And now? Now I understand what Dad never did, that love multiplies when you share it." Lily's eyes followed her 6-year-old son, who was earnestly helping a patient carpenter measure boards. "Noah taught me that." "Your grandfather said something similar when we first married," Eleanor replied. "He called it abundance thinking. The idea that there's always enough love to go around if you're brave enough to give it away." These moments became their legacy wisdom passed not through blood or inheritance, but through quiet conversations and shared purpose. Eleanor taught Lily to make Harold's favorite biscuits and shared stories of her own struggles with faith during hard times. Lily showed Eleanor how to use the community center's new computer system and brought fresh perspective to outreach programs. When the town faced a flash flood that spring, it was Lily who organized volunteers through the half-built community center, and Eleanor who opened her home to displaced families. Together, they embodied the center's mission before the building was even completed. By late summer, the construction supervisor began dropping hints. "Ahead of schedule," he'd mentioned casually. "These things don't usually happen, but everybody's putting in extra hours." Eleanor pretended not to notice. The knowing glances exchanged between workers and volunteers. The phone call came on a perfect autumn evening. Eleanor had just settled onto her porch swing with a cup of tea when Mr. Whitaker's number flashed on her screen. "They've finished, Eleanor. 6 weeks early. The inspector signed off this afternoon." Eleanor's hand flew to her heart. "Truly? Dedication ceremony whenever you're ready." His voice warmed. "Harold would be so proud." After they hung up, Eleanor sat motionless, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant orange and pink. Tears of gratitude slipped down her cheeks as she imagined Harold's face, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he was especially pleased. "We did it," she whispered to the evening breeze. "Not just a building, but everything it stands for." A single star appeared overhead, bright and clear, as if in answer. Colorful balloons arched over the entrance, dancing in the autumn breeze. Eleanor stood before the ribbon, scissors in hand, her heart pounding beneath her simple blue dress. The crowd that gathered, not just from Maplewood, but neighboring towns as well, stretched across the newly paved parking lot. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mayor Wilson announced, his voice carrying over the portable sound system, "today marks a new chapter for our community, thanks to the incredible generosity and vision of Eleanor Hayes." Applause erupted, genuine and warm. Eleanor blinked back tears as she searched the faces before her, not for her absent children, but for the hundreds who had become her extended family over these challenging months. "Mrs. Hayes," the mayor continued, "would you do us the honor?" Eleanor stepped forward, the oversized scissors trembling slightly in her hands. She locked eyes with Lily, who nodded encouragingly from the front row. Noah perched on her hip. "This center," Eleanor's voice wavered before finding its strength, "isn't my legacy. It's Harold's. And it belongs to all of you." The ribbon parted with a satisfying snip, and cheers erupted. Children rushed forward, laughing and pointing at the playground visible behind the building. A group of veterans, some in wheelchairs pushed by younger comrades, stood at attention and saluted Eleanor as she passed. "Ma'am," one elderly veteran with medals gleaming on his chest said, "what you've done here, giving us a place to gather, to help the younger vets, it means everything." Eleanor squeezed his weathered hand. "The honor is mine." Inside, the community center bustled with life. The computer lab where teens would receive tutoring. The commercial kitchen where cooking classes would teach healthy, affordable meals. Meeting rooms for support groups. A small medical clinic offering free screenings. And the library, Harold's library, filled with books for all ages. Mr. Whitaker approached with a small velvet box. "Harold wanted you to have this today," he said quietly, placing it in her palm. Inside nestled a simple gold locket. Eleanor opened it with trembling fingers to find a tiny photograph of them on their wedding day and an engraved message: "Love multiplies." The celebration continued throughout the afternoon. Children tested the playground equipment while their parents toured the facilities. Local musicians played familiar tunes, and tables groaned under potluck dishes brought by neighbors. Not once did Eleanor feel the ache of her children's absence. The community had filled that void with something genuine. As evening approached and the crowd thinned, Eleanor found a bench outside the main entrance. Lily joined her, Noah now racing around the nearby grass with other children. "Grandma, are you happy?" Lily asked softly. Eleanor watched her great-grandson's joyful play, his laughter carrying across the lawn. She thought of Harold not as he was in his final days, but strong and vibrant, with that mischievous gleam in his eye when he planned something wonderful. "More than happy," she replied, squeezing Lily's hand. "I'm at peace." The setting sun painted the sky in brilliant hues of orange and gold, casting long shadows across the freshly planted gardens. Noah waved excitedly from the top of the slide, and both women waved back. "You know," Eleanor whispered, her eyes fixed on the horizon, "we weren't left with money, Harold. We were left with love." A gentle breeze rustled the leaves above them, almost like a whispered response. Eleanor smiled, knowing that some legacies couldn't be measured in dollars, but in the countless lives touched by an open heart. If you enjoyed the story of Eleanor Hayes, I handpicked this next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it. Edit it.